Creatures are made in accordance to templates. There is one template for house cats, for example. There is also one template for lions. Both of these templates are sub-templates of the cat template. But that's actually a simplification because in the scientific classification, house cats and lions belong to different subfamilies. In case of humans, we are made in accordance to the Homo sapiens template. In this template, it's defined that humans have one head, two eyes, one mouth, and so on. In addition to physical attributes, it also defines that we have free will. What makes this template so special as compared to animal templates is that it defines an image of God. It's therefore a defined template, but the divinity itself needs to be activated in a human. That's what we call enlightenment. We need to engineer ourselves from within to make that happen. Therefore, we can call this process inner engineering. That's what spirituality is all about. Some people refuse to activate the divinity within themselves. Any progress that is made with this refusal ends up in re-engineering themselves into another image. Therefore, we can call this process image re-engineering. That's what occultism is all about. It can also be called animality because the idea is to fight against the divinity within ourselves and become like animals. That's why Darwinism teaches that we are animals. Satanists and other occultists love animal imagery such as animal masks for this reason. Our body is animalistic in nature, but thanks to the spirit we also have a divine nature. To focus on the former results in occultism and to focus on the latter results into spirituality. The goal of occultism is to be benighted, which means deactivating the divinity within oneself and thus completing the process of image re-engineering. Both spirituality and occultism are natural phenomena, and that means that God has defined what both are. In other words, He is in control. If you give power to someone who doesn't deserve it, that person will eventually become an occultist. Contrary to what Satanists claim, no initiation is required to become an occultist. All that needs to be done for a person to become an occultist naturally is to give this person power over others that he doesn't deserve. The only requirement is that this person needs to be an incompetent coward with an ego. That's all. That person will fail to exercise that power correctly. So to avoid losing that power, that person will create an alter ego that is acceptable to the ones over whom that person has power. It will be a leftist alter ego because it will represent itself with positivity to hide the negativity within. As soon as the alter ego emerges, it will clash with the true personality of that person. The alter ego becomes the public personality and the true personality becomes the private personality, which is an image of God that will be deactivated through image re-engineering. The public personality will become the new image of that person. When the sexually perverted claim that they just want to be themselves, they are talking about image re-engineering. It's biologically impossible for a man to become a woman, and vice versa, for example. So when a man dresses up as a woman, claims to be herself and demands special rights for it, he is in fact image re-engineering himself and demanding support for it. His public personality is a tolerant, sweet female. His private personality is not acceptable by society, so they create a public personality to sneak their private personality into society. So they embrace and promote an abstract idea of so-called inclusivity. In John chapter 8 verse 44, Yahshua states that the father of the Pharisees is the devil. The Pharisees are the fathers of Talmudists. Talmudists have invented communism. In Matthew chapter 23 verse 28, Yahshua states to them, "Even so you also outwardly appear righteous to men, but inwardly you are full of hypocrisy and iniquity." All evil people use the same tactics. Serial murderers who murder women always seem friendly to women, for example. Pedophiles always appear to be friendly to children, for example. You can even notice this at a much lower level. For example, people who come to your house and always feel the need to clean everything up always turn out to have dirty homes themselves. So occultists embrace moral relativism and love to convince themselves that they control what moral objectivists call good and evil. That's why they love to use binary symbolism such as checkerboards. Likewise, they use eye symbolism to symbolize seeing in the dark, but it's not because of their ability to see with their third eye. It's all pretense. They steal from others and pretend it's theirs, like the pentagram, which was once used in Catholicism to represent the so-called 5 wounds of Yahshua on the cross. Now the pentagram is associated with Satanism because occultists have stolen this symbol. This type of theft is the practice of readdressing. Every symbol is an address of a meaning. Image re-engineering is readdressing the private personality to the public personality. It causes confusion, and confusion is what makes occultism so hard to understand. They are the authors of confusion. Occultism relies on confusion to exist. Once people figure out occultism, they will rather die than to accept it, but since occultism is all about confusion, people will rather die than to accept what it truly is. People in general want to believe that they are safe. So they will believe anything that sounds good and is told to them by someone who has any kind of authority over others. The families and friends of a serial murderer are always shocked to discover that the person they thought they knew is so evil. It's difficult for them to believe that a seemingly friendly person is responsible for such unspeakable evil. They only knew his public personality. Occultism relies on disbelief. Spirituality relies on belief. I've worked for 2 occult companies and I didn't know that at the time. In fact, the second time I worked for an occult company, I knew exactly what occultism was, but that wasn't enough. I got confused all the time and that prevented me from figuring out what was going on. I've met several Satans in my life and I didn't know that until I figured out that the employer of the second occult company was a Satan. Evil always hides. In public, the evil ones masquerade as one of us. In private, which is the area of the occult, they are themselves. Psychiatrists and criminologists know about this. The better they are at their job, the less shocked they will be when dealing with evil. It's their job to do so, but if you're not one of them and you don't know about this, you will have a hard time understanding evil and therefore occultism. That's why people are so easily fooled by evil. For example, when we see a baby, we see a cute, beautiful and innocent creature, but the pedophile sees an opportunity to leech off from the baby's innocence. When we see someone with a beautiful mansion, we get inspired by that to achieve the same, but the thief sees an opportunity to steal. That's socialism in other words. Yahshua says in John chapter 10 verse 10, start quote, "The thief only comes to steal, kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and may have it abundantly." End quote. Another word for evil is cowardice. That's why it hides. Evil hates self-defense and therefore gun rights because it wants you to be defenseless against it. Even if you're not, evil wants you to feel defenseless and powerless. Evil hates freedom of speech because it allows you to expose it. Evil hates private property because it wants to steal what you have. So evil will always emerge out of the darkness as a source of hope, love and tolerance, totally not mentally ill. In politics, evil manifests as collectivism, which includes leftism. Within collectivism, evil manifests as egalitarianism because it seeks to equalize evil with good. In theology, evil manifests as occultism. In sexology, evil manifests as sexual promiscuity and perversity. The manifestations of evil are all based on the same ideas: consequentialism, anarchy, moral relativism, and so on. Occultism is all about secrets, initiation, pretense, hedonism, and so on. And that's hidden from non-practitioners, which makes it hard to explain it to them. In fact, most practitioners don't even know that they are occultists. Take Darwinists as an example. They think that they believe in science, but science doesn't require faith. They believe in an occult religion that teaches them fantasy and that there is no creation or order, only anarchism. They believe in fact that order comes from chaos. Nothing about occultism is ultimately about facts but about fantasy. Occultists who are allowed to know that fool others into not knowing that. The opposite of occultism is spirituality, which is all about love. But that makes it difficult to understand the opposite, which is all about hate. The further one goes in one direction, the harder it becomes to understand the opposite direction. But that's the trick in becoming a mystic. There's nothing too stupid, gross or immoral for an occultist. They are the seeders of shock and confusion. You cannot imagine anything that is too cruel, disgusting or nonsensical for an occultist to do. Spiritual people are about morality and they seek to become as moral as possible. Occultists are about immorality and they seek to become as immoral as possible. That's the ultimate trick in becoming an occultist of a high rank. As an occultist, the more you sin, the further you can advance in occultism. How far are you willing to go to gain power? It's like asking, how cruel, disgusting and nonsensical are you willing to become to gain power? The answer to that question determines in the mind of an occultist how strong you are. They would say, you hide your possessions from thieves because they are valuable and so do we with our religion. But they are the thieves. If there were no thieves, there would be no need to hide valuable possessions. They are the problem. What they do causes problems. Then they offer fake solutions for those problems. It's like walking into a hotel, pulling the fire alarm, walking back out and dropping your pants so that the people running outside can kiss your ass for saving them. That's how they operate in religion, politics, business and so on. They always operate in the opposite way. Whatever they do wrong, they seek to punish others for it and force everybody to accept their evil as good and good as evil, such as by blaming others for what they do. They are at war with reality. The Holy Spirit is the only reality that exists. Everything else is an illusion. When a human becomes spiritual, the Holy Spirit is welcomed into the temple. The Holy Spirit is then allowed to work through that human. Image re-engineering is the act of waging war against the Holy Spirit, and therefore occultists try to decide what reality is. They are trying to replace God. Just like spirituality is about defeating the body with the spirit, occultism is about defeating the spirit with the body. The former leads to a better body and eternal life. The latter results into death. So occultists try to fantasize their own reality and obsess with achieving immorality on their own. That's how occult organizations operate. Those who join one do so in order to obtain power from the coward who runs it and didn't earn that power. He pretends to be God. The more one in such an organization understands or falls for his fantasies, the more he will prosper in the organization and obtain power. That's what initiation in occultism means. Skills, experience, knowledge and so on won't be valued. Instead, only submission to his will be valued. It's all about worshipping the coward in charge to make him feel good about himself. He wants you to stroke his ego. He needs others to humiliate themselves so that he can feel good about himself. Think of the so-called roast on TV. It's inferior supremacy, wussy supremacy, namby-bamby supremacy, and so on. It's the desire of the inferior to be superior, and since that is impossible, they try to convince themselves and others that it's possible. They play God by trying to decide what reality is. An occultist would say, but wouldn't you want to be like your parent? Needless to say, the answer is of course yes, but occultists aren't trying to be like God, they are trying to replace him. It's a switcheroo attempt. That's why the word Antichrist means in place of Christ. Replacing God is a primary teaching in all occult religions. For example, in Gnosticism they try to convince us that God is evil because of the evil that they create in this world. In Darwinism, LaVeyan Satanism, Temple Satanism and so on, they try to deny the existence of God, but then they set themselves up as God. In UFO religions they claim that living beings have become God and that we need to follow suit, which is also the end goal of transhumanism and Darwinism. These are Antichrist religions. In politics they claim that the government is the Messiah. Occultism is theological scamming. They say that they are all about free will and the individual, but you have to go through Orthodox initiation when you join one of their organizations. What they really mean is that at the end of those initiations you will be able to establish your own organization and scam everybody else with the same type of lies. If you acknowledge your fantasies as lies, your fantasies are counted as fiction. If you don't acknowledge your fantasies as lies, your fantasies will be an attack on reality. That's what occultists mean by freedoms and free will. They want to be God. They want to be free from any rules, but they want to decide the rules for others. It's hypocrisy. They want anarchism to apply to them because anarchy applies to God. God doesn't need to follow any rules that anyone makes. Unless you are a criminologist, psychologist, mystic and so on, you will not be able to figure them out because you will have no idea what lies in the dark. Does a toy maker know what pedophiles are up to? Does a cardiologist know what serial murderers are up to? They like to make everything into something different than what it actually is, especially if it's just to pretend like they figured something out that you are too unintelligent to figure it out yourself. They are ridiculous, so they attack seriousness, give the ridiculous special treatment, and then they try to make you look ridiculous instead if you are serious. They are liars, so they attack truths, discriminate against truth speakers, give liars special treatment, and try to make you look like a liar instead if you speak the truth. They're as above, so below philosophy means putting what is above below and what is below above. It's a switcheroo, not equalization like they claim. They try to claim that they're all about equalizing heterosexuality with paraphilia, but the two are not equal. One produces children and the other one doesn't in most cases. You can't equate them. So they attack heterosexuality, for example, discriminate against heterosexuals, give paraphiles special treatment and try to make heterosexuals look like paraphiles. That's how magic works. That's how they justify censorship of everything that is good. That's occultism and leftism in a nutshell. Magic is just another word for scamming. Revelation chapter 12 verse 9 says that Satan is scamming the whole world. Revelation chapter 18 verse 23 states that all the nations were deceived with magic. Occultist Aleister Crowley spelled the word magic with a K at the end to distinguish it from the magic of magicians who are called illusionists, like Penn and Teller. So what's the difference between the two? The C version, so to speak, is a normal scam and the K version is a paranormal scam, which means that non-human occultists are behind it, such as demons or fallen angels. The difference is thus as large as between atheists and occultists. Scamming depends on communication. If you are performing a card trick, for example, you are communicating the scam through a sleight of hand. If you are performing a paranormal trick, you are communicating to demons or fallen angels to perform a paranormal scam, which might include a paranormal sleight of hand. For example, you might have heard or seen a woman put something in the drink of a man and then he falls in love with her. That's a paranormal scam. She is communicating with the demon or fallen angel to manipulate the man into falling in love with her. The more the man is a sinner, the better the scam will work. In other words, the more he has sinned, the more he has consented to the scam. There's nothing special about it. If you lie, you give others the right to lie to you. If you attack someone, you give that person the right to attack you. It's like when a magician is holding a deck of cards in his hands and showing all the cards quickly to his audience. Then he asks them to pick a card out. As he was showing all the cards quickly, he was in fact showing the same card many times. So he was manipulating them into choosing a specific card before giving them a choice. The audience has already consented to the scam. A scam is a sin. They knew what they were getting into when they decided to attend the show. Since the show is openly a scam, it's considered to be entertainment, otherwise it would be considered first and foremost a scam. Likewise, actors lie, but since they do so openly, they aren't considered to be liars. It's the switcheroo. That's why you have to think backwards in order to understand occultism. They say one thing, then they do the opposite. For example, instead of working for a salary, they will prefer that you work for them instead. They bootlicked their way up into government and made it legal for themselves to steal money from workers while claiming to support workers and work. That's why there are so-called labor parties, especially in Europe, but they are only detrimental to labor. What is called Nazism was in fact called the National Socialist German Workers' Party. Fascism was rooted in atheism and government worship. There are also labor parties in other forms of socialism, including communism. A loser is not going to think, how can I win? Instead, a loser will think, how can I scam a winner into winning for me? That's what brokers do. When they steal money from the workers, they don't call it theft, but taxation. They fantasize that it's not theft and claim that it's necessary to provide so-called social security, which should be called social insecurity instead. In other words, they set the nanny state up as the nanny messiah who will save people when they can't pay for something or when they don't have a job. They call it government benefits, but you end up losing your freedoms in return. You end up losing most of your income, and when you need any of these so-called government benefits, you receive much less than what you have paid for it in so-called taxes. In other words, they are putting an inferior standard above a superior standard. Inferior supremacy. When you make a deal with the devil, you must follow his agenda in order to receive whatever benefits are part of the deal. It's the same deal you make with the nanny state when you want to receive government benefits. You must vote left in order to keep receiving those benefits, and someone must pay for those benefits. They need consent, even if it's obtained through menticide. Take Satan in the book of Job as an example of that. Like every other creature, Satan has to obey the logos. That's why consent is important in occultism. If the nanny state was a person, her public personality would be an image of a shining messiah, but the private personality would be that of a fake god, idol, blasphemer, ignoramus, dishonorer, murderer, adulterer, thief, liar, and envier. It would be Mammon. Nanny states claim to be democratic because they need consent, but then they bring in uneducated immigrants and make them dependent on the government. The uneducated immigrants keep voting left to receive the benefits of this dependence, thus outvoting the natives and keeping the government big. Whenever rightists complain about this, the nanny and her minions claim that rightists are undemocratic and racist and want authoritarianism instead. Everything in occultism works like this. If you compare a temple to a free state, then occult organizations are dictatorships that claim to be free states. Notice how nanny states in the West claim to have a so-called mixed economy. It's a scam. You cannot have freedoms and authoritarianism at the same time. In a so-called mixed economy, you will only end up with more freedoms to choose how you will be a slave. Occultism exists in all shapes and forms. Anything goes in occultism. You can create your own occult organization if you have the power to do so. You can create your own occult religion to replace or masquerade as something else. For example, New Ageism is just sugar-coated occultism. Darwinism masquerades as science. Wicca masquerades as modern paganism, and so on. Some occult religions are about interacting with fallen humans, demons, fallen angels, or any combination of these three. In general, occult religions all work towards a common agenda, which is to achieve godhood, especially immorality and world dominance. At one point, occultism stops being just a religion and starts being something like the mafia, because occultism is ultimately about power. Then it's all about secret organizations, clubs, fraternities, and so on. It all starts with the basics. For example, in the Third World there is Voodooism, Santeria, Romani occultism, and so on. In Venezuela there is the Santos Malandros religion, which is all about worshipping deceased thugs. Santos Malandros in Spanish means holy thugs. Inferior supremacy, of course. Stealing money is theft. It doesn't matter if the government calls it taxation. If you steal, you are a thief, and if you are a thief, you are a thug. But notice how thieves in the government make themselves appear holy, the opposite of what they are. Openly supporting thugs would be considered uncivilized in the First World. In the Second World and First World, occultism is mainly promoted through Darwinism. In the First World, occultism is also promoted through New Ageism, LaVeyan Satanism, Temple Satanism, and so on. Whenever there is any kind of power, occultists try to be in charge. They don't care what they have to do to gain power, but they prefer to bootleg their way up because that's the easiest way. That counts especially for the government. They always establish indoctrination camps and call them public schools. They brainwash children in them with occultism and collectivism. Whenever there is any kind of industry or company that produces anything for the masses, occultists try to be in charge. Take Hollywood as an example. It's no coincidence that there are so many stories about artists making a deal with the devil. You don't hear anything like that in case of bakers or cooks. Just look at what artists are pushing. It's always occultism and leftism. Song after song, movie after movie, TV show after TV show, video game after video game, and so on. They're always using the cloak of hope, love, and tolerance, just like leftist politicians in any dictatorship. They promote the same ideas that are being taught in indoctrination camps. They promote sexual anarchy, which is taught in indoctrination camps. They promote nihilism and moral relativism, which is taught in indoctrination camps through Darwinism. They want to convince us that everything is the result of coincidences and struggle, which is how they justify their hedonism, especially sexual anarchy. To make the alleged struggle manageable, they promote big government, which is also taught in indoctrination camps. If one form of occultism fails or is exposed, they will just invent a new one. They do so in politics. Take socialism as an example. It was first implemented in Europe in the form of communism and then fascism. After both failed, democratic socialism was introduced as the solution. Occultism shouldn't be underestimated. It's easier to market and sell than spirituality. Humans have an animalistic nature and a divine nature. Occultism appeals to the animalistic nature which prefers indulgence over abstinence. Occultism allows indulgence in sex, but spirituality promotes sexual abstinence. Occultism allows indulgence in food, but spirituality promotes fasting. We want a fraternity-based religion, not a family-based religion. In spirituality, we have to acknowledge that our enemies have the same father as we do. Therefore, our enemies are our siblings and we don't want that. We want our enemies to be unrelated to us. We want to choose our own family members like it happens in a fraternity. Spirituality doesn't support it, but occultism does. You can curse your enemies in occultism. In spirituality, you have to bless them instead. We practice a religion to get something out of it. Therefore, we want as much evidence as possible that it makes sense to practice a religion. You can hear in particular atheists complaining about this. They want evidence for God. In spirituality, experiencing anything supernatural is rare. God wants us to live a normal life while being aware of the supernatural. We don't want that. We want to experience life like in Dungeons and Dragons, The Lord of the Rings, The Legend of Zelda, and so on. Occultism supports that, but not in such a nice way though. If you get deep enough into occultism, you won't have to wait for the evidence of the supernatural. You will get in touch with demons or even fallen angels. The Bible emphasizes over and over that we have to believe, but in occultism you don't have to believe at one point. You will experience the supernatural firsthand. You don't have to follow any rules in occultism if you become powerful enough. You can pretend to be your own god. If an occultist does something wrong, he or she is likely to force others to see it as being right instead. Occultists don't like to take responsibility. In Matthew chapter 16 verse 24, Yahshua states, "If anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me." That doesn't make sense to an occultist. If you put a cross on the back of an occultist, he or she will try to scam someone to take the cross and put it on his or her back instead. John chapter 1 verse 5 states, "The light shines in the darkness and the darkness hasn't overcome it." Darkness cannot comprehend light. For evil, light is a mystery, so it pretends to be a mystery instead. Think of the mystery schools. For good, darkness isn't a mystery. It's a tragedy that only exists to support freedom of choice. Darkness is everywhere, but light isn't. Without spirituality, humans can't grow beyond earthliness, which includes materialism. You are only worthy to be awarded for what you are willing to fight for. Occultism means anti-spirituality, and they show that in everything that they do. They know that they are inferior, so they fight the superior, but being superior to them isn't enough to remain superior to them. They are at constant war with the spiritual because they are constantly confronted by their inferiority. Everybody is better than them and they are constantly confronted by that. It fuels their hatred against everything that is good. So they fight, and so should we. We are constantly under attack by them in this spiritual warfare. They attack children first and foremost. They are the easiest targets. Think of Halloween, for example, or sexual indoctrination in indoctrination camps. Something learned at an early age will be easy when one is old. Our enemies have no shame, compassion, mercy, truth, bravery, and so on. We need to be the opposite of them. Whether you believe in one God, multiple gods, or no God, if you are spiritual, your spirituality must mean anti-occultism, otherwise it doesn't mean anything. Likewise, you can be a nationalist, but if you are not willing to fight for your nation, then your nationalism will be worthless. Whether we like it or not, we are in a spiritual war, and our war is against occultism. Everything we are and do must be spiritual and anti-occult, and these two must be one and the same to us in everything we do.